I never turned.
You can connect the all.
Yeah. Yep.
If you want to create a Zoom and let's step in now and send it to me too.
Yep, I'll do that. We're in Zoom now and we're on YouTube, and I'll just get this to Steph right now.
So on that email, yeah, let me make sure.
Okay, should be in her mailbox right now. And yours and Jason's. You should have the link to the Zoom if you wanted to share something so that Stephanie could see, so that Stephanie can see it, and then Chris has it as well. Good.
There we go.
I'll need the USB too.
Okay. Well, your meeting's at 7, your notes at 7:30. Okay, so yeah, it's okay. I came for free food. That's why I went. Oh, it does? But I would have gotten here at 7. I had Sarah pick me up so I could get here for the free food. I mean, also to see Sarah, but no, it's okay. I mean, the website does say, because I checked today.
That's you. Yes.
You're Allen. Ready? Okay, we'll call to order this Easton Reading Region 9 Joint Board of Education. I'll ask each chair to call their individual boards to order.
May 23rd, 2023 at 7:11 p.m. We'll call to order this regular meeting of the Reading Board of Education. All members in attendance, with the exception of Stephanie Olson, who will be joining us remotely shortly.
I'll call the Easton Board to order at 7:11. All members present other than Jen, who I think is on the way. So
Okay, I'll call the Region 9 Board of Education to order at 7:12. I guess. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Full attendance. Okay, our first order of business is public comment. Is there any member of the public at this time? Please go to the podium. Please give your name and address. We don't have that the comments are limited to agenda items on this agenda, but please keep your comments under 3 minutes or less. Okay.
Briefly to interject, Ms. Olson joined at 7:12.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ann Manosky, and as many of you probably know me, I'm an Easton resident, parent, and president of the Connecticut Republican Assembly, as well as Connecticut Parents Involved in Education. We recently learned that the 10th grade Barlow wellness class has components of comprehensive sex education, as stated by the teacher. So it includes materials from a 10-page sex ed assignment, which the teacher had the students read aloud. Terms such as abortion, first on the list. Some of this material is considered pornographic. This has no place in our schools. Sex ed is not technically mandated by the Connecticut state statutes. We know we have family life. It's on many years ago, the family life class in 5th grade. I believe that's still in class. I believe I read someone's comment that it's still maybe in 4th grade instead of 5th grade. Apologies, I forgot my regular classes. What other sexual instructions might be given to students without parents' knowledge? Why are students younger than 16 given a vocabulary list with the person? This is a morality issue, serious, one, very serious. I wasn't aware or thinking of the PPRA violations that are possible to what has been given to the children. And I've also been reached out to parent friends of mine who have children graduating here who said this has been going on for a number of years. I sent an email to Dr. McKinnon, Chairman D'Agostino, and Vice Chairman Johnson with the questions as to this sex ed assignment and regarding the family lit class. Comprehensive sex ed was on a bill, SB1, Transparency in Education, this session, and it was defeated, had the language removed. So there is no comprehensive sex education that's supposed to be taught, especially if it's parents don't even know what is being taught in class. The district evidently is hiding what they are teaching. This is a call to action for parents and residents to step up. This can no longer go on. Residents and parents move here to send their children to what they believe are great schools. Unfortunately, the statistics are showing that the NEP scores are going down. I believe there was an article that Easton is now hiring more people to teach math. Why don't we teach the ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, math, science, history? We love an extra American history class instead of abortion. Really. Residents of Easton and Reading want their taxes to be used on education, not indoctrination. I had in my letter to Dr. McKinnon, Chairman D'Agostino, and Vice Chairman Johnson, I am requesting a curriculum review. Or I set a curriculum committee review, and then I would like to be on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any further public comment? Brings us to item 3, board member comment, 5 words or less. Nothing. Anyone? I'm only joking about the 5 words.
Something briefly,
Yes,
a public service announcement for everyone here, as well as the parents who might be watching this. There's an epidemic going around of injuries to student athletes, and it's a function of strength training. And what we're finding is that there are so many kids, whether it's soccer, volleyball, or elsewhere, who are getting themselves injured because they're getting to a high level of skill, and they're not matching that skill to a certain amount of strength. I'm not talking about hitting the gym and getting ripped. I'm talking about the basic sort of physical therapy type exercises to strengthen around your ankles, your knees, your hips. We really should think about the ways in which we can encourage that within the communities and the way that we can bolster it amongst the sort of youngest of our children as they're doing PE and starting to do those kind of stretches and exercises. I have family members who were recently injured in pretty serious ways, and it's a shame because we really think we can prevent these injuries. So would love to see us make some efforts in that space.
I think Dr. McKinnon's ankle.
I'm also very concerned about Dr. McKinnon's ankle, of course.
any further board member comment? I just have one. If you're watching this at home, and you're very much interested in learning more about our school district, we could use another recording secretary. We have Sarah Odo, does a fantastic job, but we can't clone her and we're short. And so if you're interested, if you really want to learn more, you're just an insomniac, you can't do anything at night, just contact central office. We're looking for a recording secretary. Yes.
I just wanted to add that the Hunchback of Notre Dame was just this past week. To the cast, the crew, everyone who participated, the parents, thank you. It was phenomenal. Job well done. I also wanted to say thank you to our social workers, I think at the school, who may have had a hand in the Jordan Porco mental health days that happened 2 days last week at Barlow. It was a great showing of the students, a lot of participation. So there's a tree in the entryway of the school. So if you come in and you're able to take take part in the Barlow-Palooza, that's tomorrow. You'll see the tree and it's got all these leaves with gratitude that the kids wrote. Take a minute to just check that out. I think you'll be thrilled that you got to read some of their comments.
Thank you. Okay, any further? We'll move on to discussion possible action. First item is the healthy food certification. This is an item we take care of every year. I don't know if Mr. Parker would like to, in 10 words or less, give a brief outline of what this entails, but then each board should have a set of motions in front of you. If we can do some housekeeping. Mr. Parker.
This is, this comes from the state. It's guidelines that we need to follow in order to ensure that we're taking the very best care of our kids we can. And so I think that we can go with the first motion.
Absolutely.
Okay. First motion states healthy food certificate pursuant to CGS section 10-215F. The Easton Board of Education certifies that all food items offered for sale to students in schools under its jurisdiction and not exempt from Connecticut nutrition standards published by the Connecticut State Department of Education will comply with the Connecticut nutrition standards during the period of July 1, 2023 through July 30th, 2024. The certificate shall include all food offered for sale to students separately from reimbursable meals at all times and all sources, including but not limited to school stores, vending machines, school cafeterias, culinary programs, and any fundraising activities on school premises sponsored by the school or non-school organizations and groups. I have a second.
Second.
Thank you, John. Any further discussion from the Easton group? Want to do it one by one? You want to do
Discussion together.
Did you say July 30th or June 30th? Just clarify that's June 30th.
Mine was, yes,
July 123 to June 30.
July 123 through June 30.
We want to make the same motion, substituting the word Reading for Easton. Laura, second, John Shanahan.
I want to make the same motion for Region 9. Okay, you vote.
Any discussion?
So while we're on the topic, it's appropriate to thank Dave Kennedy for his work in food service generally and the
Still a standard.
It's okay, no.
On favor? Aye. Passes 5-0.
all in favor of Reading, starting Stephanie.
yes,
Pass unanimously, 7-0.
All in favor of Region 9? Unanimous. Okay.
Second motion, exemption for food and beverage items. The Eastern Board of Education will allow the sale to students of food items that do not meet the Connecticut nutrition standards and beverages not listed in section 10-2021Q of the Connecticut General Statutes, provided that the following conditions are met. 1, the sale is connected with an event after the end of the regular school day or on the weekend. 2, the sale is at a location of the event. And 3, the food and beverage items are not sold from vending machines or the school store. An event, quote unquote, is an occurrence that involves more than just one regularly scheduled practice, meeting, or extracurricular activity. For example, soccer games, school plays, interscholastic debates are all events. But soccer practices, play rehearsals, and debate team meetings are not. The regular school day is the period from midnight before to 30 minutes after the end of the official school day. Location, quote unquote, means that the event is being held and must be in the same place as the food and beverage sales.
Second.
Somebody want to make that motion in Reading, replacing the word Easton with the word Reading? Shrug, second, Laura.
Region 9, someone substitute Region 9.
Second.
And,
Okay, all in favor? 5-0.
Calling the question in Reading, Stephanie?
Yes.
Room. Motion carries unanimously, 7-0.
Region 9, all in favor? Unanimous. Okay, that brings us to item B, which is superintendent's report. That's two parts, communication plan and new website update. And I will turn that floor over to Dr. McKinnon.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to provide a superintendent report. Tonight, we're going to highlight just a few elements of our work that's been continuing after we passed the budget and developed our strategic plan, which has really become useful in identifying the work that we need to focus on now and in the near future. You're all familiar with the strategic plan and how it identifies 5 core priorities. We've developed and we've started work on some of those priorities, and we wish to highlight some of those for you tonight. And so the first item is a communication plan. I'm going to share my screen for Zoom. And we'll start talking about the communication plan. So you can see at home, if you're watching, you should see your screen. That will be good, John? Yeah, good. Okay. And if you're in the audience, I apologize, but please draw your attention to the 2 screens, either on your left or your right. The communication plan is essential to have a 2-way dialogue and for student engagement within our school districts. So we've created, in the same way that we created a strategic plan website, we've created a strategic plan related to our community, our communication plan, and you can see this is what we're looking at, right? So we believe that communication is important so that we have a clear and reliable message that we're sending, and that we can build a partnership between home and school. We have the following 4 beliefs. We believe that relationships thrive when communication is active, ongoing, and is based on listening. We believe that communication is not one way. We will actively engage stakeholders in a 2-way dialogue that meets everyone's needs. We believe that our school districts are leaders in the community, and so therefore we're going to strive to share messages with the communities of Easton and Reading that connect and build meaning. And 4th, we believe that communication is more successful when it's done in a timely manner. Based on those beliefs, we have some guiding principles. Number 1, ongoing communication will highlight the positive stories in our schools and foster confidence and support in the education being provided to students within the district and work being done by the Board of Education, the administration, and the staff. 2, social media will be used to communicate with the community through live social media posts and be used at Board of Education meetings and other activities. 3, we will establish a communication framework, which will be used to consider how and when we communicate with stakeholders, both internally and externally. And 4, we will provide training and shared expectations to ensure that information is shared in a consistent and user-friendly manner. So based on those beliefs and guiding principles, we have 5 main priorities for our communication plan that we'll highlight during this presentation. First, we want to engage community members with your work. 2, we want to promote student success and celebrate student experiences within our schools, cultivate community engagement, streamline communications, and manage for urgent communications both internally and externally. So this is the front page of our website. At the bottom, in the footer, there's a link to a survey. I'm going to show you the survey that we sent out to all stakeholders approximately a week ago. And at the time that I developed these goals and priorities, we probably had about 550 responses. That's climbing now to over 700. And just an example of how fast our community responds to a survey, within 24 hours, we had 500 responses. It's a really good sample size in terms of to use that data to establish goals and priorities. So let me go to the second tab of this website, which is how do we come up with these beliefs and priorities? So I'm going to scroll down a little bit and talk a little bit about the parent input. So as I mentioned, we sent a survey to Easton, Reading and Region 9 families just a couple of weeks ago. We asked two broad questions. Communication from the district is effective, and we had a 5-point Likert scale, and communication from the school is effective. Again, we had the same scale. 46% of respondents indicated that they strongly agree that communication from the district is effective. 51% agree, and we have a small percentage in the disagree category, and even less than 1% strongly disagree. It's a similar story for schools, perhaps a little bit smaller. 50% agree that communication from schools are effective. 38.7% strongly agree. 8.6% disagree. And from the back end, as an administrators, we can actually drill down and see that data as well. The most important question we asked our families was, which communication methods do you prefer? And essentially, we share information with our community for a variety of purposes. Classroom information about student progress. We share documents and procedures. We share information regarding events that happen in our schools. We share information about weather, community announcements, and so on. And so we asked our stakeholders, which method of communication do you prefer for each communication type? And you can see here that we looked at using the website, using email, using phone calls, social media, and the use of text messages, and even looking at PowerSchool. And from this data, we developed this matrix. And what this matrix says is it describes the type of information we're going to share with you and how we're going to share that information in the future. So if you look at the top example, it says community announcement. If it's a community announcement, we intend to use email, website, a text message, and social media. We're not going to use, obviously, a phone call or PowerSchool. If we're sharing information about events, we intend to use an email, a website, a text message, and social media. If we're providing you with general information, then we're going to use just email and website. If we're providing information about your student and how they're progressing, then we're going to use email, a phone call, and PowerSchool. If we're providing information about a weather alert, either a 2-hour delay, cancellation, and so on, we're going to be using an email, the website, text messages, and we are no longer going to be using a phone call at 5 a.m. to tell you that we have a 2-hour delay. If there's going to be an emergency in the district, we're essentially going to use all lines of communication except PowerSchool. We may use PowerSchool internally, but we're not going to use that as a communication method. So the goal of the survey was for us to come up with what we believe, what our guiding principles were, but most importantly, how do we communicate with stakeholders? How do you want to be communicated with? And we did provide an open-ended question where parents could provide their comments. And we incorporated those comments in this PowerSchool is a bummer. For every communication in the school, especially from individual teachers, it would be great if this could be if this would always go to both parents, not just the mother as a default. I find that I miss a lot of information. Too many apps and interfaces without a central hub to provide guidance. So let's try to consolidate. PowerSchool, okay, you can a comment there. My biggest issue is that email communications are usually sent as attachments, and you have to download the attachment as a PDF, which makes it hard to access and impossible to search your inbox. I would like teachers to reach out to me via a phone call if my student isn't doing well in their class. Expectations should be established among school staff in terms of response time to emails received. For example, parents should receive a response within 48 hours. I've sent emails to which I never receive a reply. Create a list of announcements so parents can go back and check what those announcements are. There's information here about the website, how it's out of date, and it's very difficult to find in someone. So generally, we had over 500 pieces of data from a qualitative perspective that we used to develop those guiding principles. And again, I will go to the next item on the across the top of the website, our guidelines. And here we define what our guidelines are for communication and communication protocols. So at the beginning of the year, you received a chain of communication. And in other words, if you have a particular concern, where do you go first? And we don't have this because we're trying to not have a call go to the superintendent. But really the purpose of this is if someone contacts my office and it's about a report card or a grade or a bus transportation stop issue, or even if it's about bullying, there are often places that a parent can go to get that information more effectively than to come to me. And again, it's not because I don't want to answer those questions, it's because I often do communicate with the administrators about what that request is, and our administrative team and our teachers respond to the concern. So we want to take this format and make it a little bit more graphical. So this is just an example, kind of what we intend to do here. Let me just show you. Okay, so getting back to our priorities and actions, these are our 5 main priorities. And under each of these priorities, we have specific actions. And I apologize, I'm trying to figure this up now. We essentially defining what those priorities are, and we're going to identify action steps that we're taking immediately over the summer, and also action steps that we're taking next year as well to accomplish these goals. So for example, promote student success and celebrate student experiences within our schools. You can see that we intend to share inspiring stories, interviews, photos, videos to share student success and notable accomplishments, develop online channels in which student stories can be shared, schedule opportunities to celebrate staff and student highlights, explore galleries featuring projects and student work, in particular showcase Gilboa High School experiences to families who are transitioning to the high school. And so we will send this to you. We're looking for your feedback. However, we feel like this is a major step forward in communication, and it clearly identifies what our priorities are, what our action steps are over the next 12 to 18 months, and how we intend to increase engagement within our communities. And again, what that system of engagement is going to look like. So related to the communication plan is item number 2, which is our new website that we're developing. One of our priorities here was to launch a new website and to kind of not resuscitate the old one, but to come up with something brand new. So, Jeff Bradbury, who is our new Director of Digital Learning, is sitting over on the right-hand side. I'll start off the presentation. I'll turn it over to Jeff, and Jeff is going to delve into the work he's done with the new website. So, first of all, the current website. Where do we start? It is outdated. It's not searchable. Users need to click many times to find information. We don't have a good mobile experience, and that is predominantly most of the way our parents interact is to go to a website on their phones. We need to improve navigation. We need to improve drop-down menus. We're changing the color, tone. I'm told a former superintendent who was here for about 8 months, a year, picked maroon and so on, and so that's the colors that you've had since. So there's actually research around color and graphic design that we're going to bring in to the new website. And the current website doesn't really highlight student experiences. So as you've seen, there's a kind of a consistent branding that's taking place with our strategic plan and now our communication plan, and which includes a curriculum plan, which Dr. Pearson Hugo is going to talk about again tonight as well. So you can see on the screen here that we're trying to keep things in a kind of a consistent branded manner. The new website is going to be aligned to our priorities and actions. It's going to be modern, user-friendly, responsive. It's going to have integrated opportunities for social media. Finally, we're going to integrate calendars. You'll be able to subscribe to calendars so you can get up-to-date information. And most importantly, it'll be much easier for us to update the website so that my superintendent letter about COVID is not one of the things that you see when you go to. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff. He's going to take you through some high-level pictures of kind of where we are with website development and what you will expect from new features.
Good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody doing tonight? It was great seeing your smiles just now. Going over some of the pain points. How many of you agree with some of these pain points that we've been discussing? We're here to fix all that. I'm excited about this project. I'm sitting here today with my 9th week in the district. And over the last 9 weeks, I've had an opportunity to work with every single building, all of our administrators, met many of you, had an opportunity to sit down with our parent organizations. And I'm excited to show you where we are. As you can see, we have a brand new website. We're all excited about it. At the top, we have an easy to follow navigation. That was one of the things that kept coming up is I can't find something. It's not searchable. So I'm excited to share with you that on the district page and from the district page, you can type in anything that you need and it'll search every single building and come up. In addition to that, we've got this nice story area. And anybody who was at the John Reed concert last week can see that was one of the pictures from the orchestra. They did a great job. And one of the things that we're looking to do with this top section is to really highlight the stories of our school district, and especially tell the story of who is ER9. It's one of the things that I asked every single administrator that I sat down with over the last 9 weeks is, who is ER9? What's the heartbeat of your school? We've all worked really hard to make sure that that heartbeat is showing up in every single location on this website. Up on the very, very top, you'll notice a couple of things. It's kind of hard to see, but up on the very top right, on the district page, we have quick, easy navigation for all of our school buildings. And right underneath of that, you'll see the little green, we call those our finger graphics. And that's quick and easy access to our strategic plan, our new curriculum strategic plan, and also our budgets. We'll go through that in a little bit. Okay, oh, there you go. Underneath of our hero section, we have what I call our parent menu. Quick access to items like parent portal, transportation, bus routes, a nice place we have called Join the Team for prospective staff members, just like I was. In the middle, we have something that I know is really exciting. We have a subscribable and searchable Google Calendar section. So the nice thing about this is that all of our Board of Ed calendars are going to be infused in our website, all of our clubs and activities, all of our athletic calendars, everything that you see is going to be on these building websites, on our district website, and easy to see and subscribable. We're even going to make a page that has all the links. That way somebody can just come in here, click on the button, and next thing you know, you can get notifications. So it's very easy to get our district news and building updates. At the bottom, two things that I'm really excited about. Our new teaching and learning center. 4 areas that are gonna highlight who we are and the great work that we're doing. I'll show you a little bit about that on our next slide there. And at the bottom, you can see we have a section where we're gonna be able to show off those quick messages, social media, and a lot more. So let's dive into some of these sections. Let's go to the next slide, Dr. McKinnon. And you'll see here at the top, we have that teaching and learning center. On the left, we have our curriculum corner. In the middle, we have our high impact instruction. We have the resources where we're going to be sharing everything that's going on in our classrooms. And then one of my favorite sections, student stories. And I've had an opportunity over the last 9 weeks to meet our amazing teachers. And I keep asking the question, what is happening in your classrooms and how do we share that success? And this is going to be that place where we share all the great success that's happening in year 9. On the bottom right, you can see that we have our hero image. And in the middle, this is our new navigation. I'm really excited about this. So there's a few different places here for navigation. This is our larger one. And you can see here that we have very easy access to all of our pages, our departments, drop downs, Board of Education, agendas, you name it, quick and easy access. And yes, it is extremely mobile friendly. And on the right of that, you can see what we're calling our finger menus there, those 3 graphics that represent our strategic vision. And I think one of my other favorite spots in this, it's fully translatable, both on mobile and on the desktop. Moving on to our next section is an example of what our 30-day calendar can look like. Now, this is going to be the default for this page, but you can also toggle this to look in as a list view. And you can notice here, if you can zoom in there on the left, on the district page, we have each of our building community calendars and our Board of Ed calendar. So we're going to be able to give you direct access to your particular board, all boards, any of the buildings, all, nothing, or some. Very easy, very searchable, very subscribable, and goes directly into our Google system. One more page I want to share with you with features is what happens inside. On the left here, we have a typical department page. Everybody seems to love the teddy bear graphic. But on here, we're really trying to make sure that no matter where you're looking, if it's on a mobile device or on a desktop device, you have the information, it's searchable. So in this particular example, you've got information on the top about our nurse, you've got our welcome, very easy, very clickable. You can click on to make a phone call, make an email, anything that you need. And then those accordion links are going to be basically our frequently asked questions. How do you do things? What do I need? We're working with all of our department chairs, our department leaders right now to make sure everything has a unified look. So no matter what building you're in, what department you're in, you're there. And if you look on the right, you'll notice this is what a building is going to look like. Similar and very clean. So the other question that comes up is, how are we going to continue this new communications platform? And on our next section, you'll notice here that we have a brand new communications portal. No more downloading of PDFs. The nice thing about our communication platform, it's all in one system, one messenger, one app. And with that, it is completely connected into PowerSchool, which means we can message a building, message a class, bus, an athletic group, club, anything that PowerSchool pulls. We're excited about that. So not only do we have a new way of doing community messages, but we've also got a great new way to share on social media through this app, SMS text messaging, text to speech, which I'm excited about. And also we can do this through our voice calling.
Just not at 5 a.m.
Just not at 5 a.m. Susie. As you can see, we're completely innovating not only the visual experience, but also the experience that we have in our messenger platform as well, meeting the needs of our district and helping to tell the story of our students, our staff, and our community. So the next question that's probably on your mind is, what happens next? Well, here we are. It is May 23rd, and we're calling this our pre-launch. I gotta ask, What do you think so far?
Thank you.
Good.
As a parent, thank you.
We just left 1993.
It's been an amazing journey, and as somebody who's walking into the district, thank you all for working with me. And I said that to all of our staff and students and everything. 2 weeks ago, I had an amazing opportunity to come here for a few hours, and I had an hour with about a dozen of our seniors. And they walked me through this building, and they showed me what is the heartbeat of this school. And we started to build out a pretty amazing Joe Barlow page that I'm looking forward to launching next year. And so I don't want to give too much of that away, but the kids are having a huge imprint on this. So here we are, May 23rd, our pre-launch. Sometime in early June, we're going to be reaching out for some more feedback. We want to make sure that we have everybody's input on this, so that way we know when we get ready for launch, it's there. We are going to do a community feedback session, and then on July 1st, we go live. I want to say thank you one more time.
Thank you, Jack. And one of the key features that we go back to, let's see, here we go. Yep, there we go. One of the key features, what do we call these? The fingers?
So I'm doing the finger graphics.
The finger graphics. Okay, so on the finger graphics, you can see a quick link to either our strategic plan, our communication plan, budgets, and so on. And within that, one of those finger graphics, we have the curriculum plan for 23 to 26. And one of our strategic priorities was to develop a 5-year curriculum plan. And we said we were going to do that in year 2. And so we still have a lot of work to launch that 5-year curriculum plan, because again, this is considered really year 1. 2023 considered year 1, 2024 considered year 2, and so on. And we've done some work in that area, and Dr. Pearson-Hugo is going to talk a little bit about where we are in this curriculum, 5-year curriculum plan. We're still under development. This is a 30,000-foot view, but we're making some progress. Our goal is to eventually turn the curriculum work that you're about to see also into some type of interactive website as well. And, yeah.
Well, this is exciting work. It is terrific to feel after a number of years and a number of changes in central office. The years that I've been here, I think I've worked with now 1, 2, 3, 4, and maybe 4.5 to 5 superintendents at this point. It does seem as if our leadership team is at a point of cohesion and innovation, and it's really exciting. In 2019-20, a number of you may have been involved with me on a joint curriculum committee endeavor to improve our public communication of curriculum. We spent some time talking about how we could better communication, how we could improve the way that we share information with parents. We looked at a lot of websites. We surveyed parents. We created a long-term plan. We were so excited to go, and that was around January of 2020. So I don't need to tell you the rest of that story, but needless to say, the work was unfortunately stalled for some time. It has been terrific now to have some stable leadership and be able to come back to that work with fresh eyes, with a new look at what we need to share with parents and the best way to go about doing that. So what I want to share with you tonight is an overview of what the curriculum planning process entails, because it is so much more than just making curriculum documents available, although that's certainly an important piece of this. So to begin, it's important to think about what guides all of us. And for that, we really think about our vision, our mission, our equity and inclusion statement, those guiding statements that chart the path in the ERM. And so that's the entry point for this curriculum plan. And from there, we jump into the curriculum overview, and you can see a statement I put together here that curriculum should truly be the heart and soul of what we're all about. This is really the important work with our students, and it should be such an important part of the story that we tell. So this includes some information about what sound curricula should include, the different components, and this is also based on what we heard from parents. This is what they wanted to know. They said, yes, we're interested in generally an overview, but don't spend too much time telling us about each individual standard. We can look for that information if we're that interested. Give us a link, that's just fine. What we really want to see are the concepts that my children will be taught over the course of the year, that pacing, and then the concepts in general. And so the new public-facing documents that have been drafted over the last 3 years, and those are still in process in some cases, in other cases they haven't finalized, they highlight sort of the meat and potatoes, the content, the skills, the piece, less information about essential questions and enduring understandings, although those are all linkable in the documents. When we develop curriculum, it is a multi-stage process. So we think about interactions with students, the important part, the teaching points, content and skills, the resources that we're going to use. Sometimes those are textbooks, sometimes those are websites, sometimes those are other materials, hands-on materials, primary source documents, so many different things. And then, of course, we think about how we are going to evaluate students. This entails the purpose of a review and development plan, which you are welcome to read in more detail. I plan to share this document with you so that you can read it at your leisure. But of course, we want to have alignment between the written, the taught, and the tested curriculum. It is great to have a beautifully written curriculum that sits in a binder somewhere. That's probably a whole lot less important than how children are learning about the world around them, how they are deepening their understanding, and then how they're learning how to apply understanding to the real world, right? That generalization, which is so much of our work. So we talk a lot also about instruction. It's just not the content and the skills, but it's also our methodology, having clear learning goals, identifying success criteria, and involving students in the selection of tools and resources. Providing high quality feedback to students, as well as providing high quality feedback to our teachers so that they can continue in that process. There are many different people who take part in the curriculum development process. This is certainly not something that happens in central office alone. And as you know, we are sort of a small place in many ways. We say we're sort of small but complex in terms of our curriculum leadership team. So because I am a department of one, essentially, I work so closely with different content leaders at the building level, primarily. So that takes a number of different forms. I want to keep scrolling down. So of course, all of you, boards of education, play a very important role in that process, especially through our curriculum committees, district administration, curriculum steering. Curriculum steering is an important group in ER9. It is a pre-K through 12 group that is a joint group. There's representation from all 3 districts. This group charts the path of many of our initiatives. This group has not met over the last year because honestly, given all of the transitions that we have gone through in terms of leadership, it was not the best way to engage them, to pull them out of their classrooms when we were in such a transition process. So I'm excited to bring this group back together at the end of this year and into next year to get back into a regular meeting cadence. Our content leaders are especially important in ER9. We really have almost no coordinators, so our content leaders are important to us. So at the high school level, that includes our department chairs, and it includes our instructional leaders. At the middle school and elementary school level, those are our content specialists, our literacy specialists, our math specialists, and in Reading, our science and technology coach. The building administrators participate actively in this process, and of course, they need to be curriculum leaders themselves. They are in the classroom, they're assessing instruction, so they need to be knowledgeable about what they're seeing in order to provide effective feedback to their teachers. So finally, when we determine that a particular area of curriculum will be under review, and that may happen for a variety of different reasons, which I'll get into shortly, I assemble a curriculum writing team. That curriculum writing team may be a portion of a department. It could be, say, at the elementary level, one grade level rep that agrees to represent mathematics instruction or science instruction or integrated language arts. But that curriculum writing team is assembled for a period of time to devote energy at meetings to review resources. Sometimes it has to do with textbook selection, but ultimately to weigh in on the worthiness of a particular resource or curriculum document, and then be a part of the presentation to the curriculum committees. And ultimately, the teachers have the most important role because they are the implementers of the curriculum. They are responsible then for taking that good work and then putting it into action for students. Okay, so you've heard me talk over the years, if you've been on the board for some time, about backwards design. Backwards design really means that you're planning with the end in mind. So that means we determine desired results. Where do we want students to be at the end of this unit, at the end of this grade, at the end of this course? And then what is the assessment evidence that will tell us that they have learned what we thought they would learn? And then finally, then planning backwards, how are we going to get them there? So chart the instruction that will help them to deepen their understanding in their content. Right, so each one of the stages of curriculum development is so important. It begins with review and research. And that can take a lot of different forms. So if we are looking to change a textbook, say at the high school level, and the textbook we find is outdated, it's an area where there have been some advances, the textbook information might not be entirely relevant to our students in this current year, a committee will come together and they will look at a number of different textbooks. They'll read them, they'll include members of the board curriculum committee, and we'll get some feedback, input and feedback from teachers, and ultimately make a recommendation. That's in the review and research stage. When we are looking to make a somewhat technical adjustment, it's not going to make a major change in curriculum in terms of the content or the skills. That review and research stage might be somewhat compacted. And so that could take place over a year. And then we might move to finalize the curriculum design, right? So we would make some adjustments to the written curriculum and then into implementation. If, in another case, we hear from the state that they've updated standards, or we've received brand new standards, as was the case with, say, the next generation science standards a number of years ago, that is a much more significant change. So that review and research stage might need to take a longer period of time, because it's important that we study the new standards and the approach. In some cases, it's an entirely different approach to instruction. That was the case with the next generation science standards. That is currently the case with the core arts standards that we are reviewing right now. And so that period of time is important, because then we also might be reaching out to neighboring districts to say, how are you grappling with these new standards? Is there some type of collaboration that we might engage in so that we can better our work? And then ultimately, we move to curriculum development and design. And then we would bring our work to a committee of the Board of Education and provide information, look for approval, and then it would go to the full board. At that stage, it would be implemented, and then it would be monitored. So while that is the typical process, the length of time in any one stage could vary slightly, depending on the changes that need to occur. Currently, we are looking to change the format of all of our curriculum documents into a template that is aligned with the feedback we received from parents a couple of years ago. So that process at the elementary school and middle school has moved along fairly quickly. Because if you consider at an elementary school, all students have the same math curriculum, they all have the same English language arts curriculum and so on. At the high school, we have over 160 courses. So this is a matter of taking a look at all of those courses and then developing priorities. How can we chunk those courses into different categories and then prioritize that work in such a way so that we can devote attention accordingly? Because I can look at all of the summer work days that are available, and there might still not be enough time for our teachers to be able to do that writing. And then for us, honestly, to properly vet what they have written before then we look to make it public, right? So in the case where we're just changing formatting and we're not changing content, that does not go through the same full cycle. And this is walking through each one of the steps, which we don't need to do because I was talking about it. And finally, Dr. McKinnon is going to provide you with just a general overview of a 5-year plan, K through 12, which I know is very hard to read. And so this is K through 12. We are working to develop a version of this at the high school level, which of course is broken down by department and sub-department and has a much higher level of detail. But you can in general see the phases of curriculum development go across the 5 years. There are a number of areas that were under review prior to the pandemic, and that review has continued and will be finishing up soon. So art and music falls into that category. And then there are some areas of the curriculum, such as health and PE, where the standards have just recently been updated. So that review and research and review is just started. We are anticipating state of Connecticut new social studies standards next month in June. So we are excited to see those new standards. And then that will kick off review for that. So we are so pleased to bring this together in a form. This is more of a brochure form now that our web designer has devoted energy into the communications plan and the website design. Now we will be focusing some energy on the curriculum side of things so that we can move some of that public facing work that we kicked off last year with the help of Sarah Scrupani and move that now into more new website. Sure. Yeah. Sarah's going to send the link to all of you so you can take it. I'm happy to take any questions. Kathy.
Could you just speak a little bit to the timeline? Is it 5 years from beginning review and research to, and I know it might vary, but it looks like a 5-year cycle. So, for example, if you start math, review and research this year, when would you expect to implement that typically?
Right. So what this doesn't show is what's happening this year and what might have happened last year. So for instance, if we take K-12 fine and performing arts, they begin their curriculum revisions in 2021, even though it was a little bit interrupted. And they have continued them. We hope to have those finished up over the summer. That's the aim. And so when you look at that work, it doesn't provide the whole story because you can't see what happens. So in most cases, a 5-year cycle would provide enough time for review, research, development, and implementation at the least, right? It might also include monitoring, which would come after implementation.
So in theory, you would expect the curriculum to be in any one area to be refreshed once every 5 years. Is that
in any one area, meaning for every at the high school level, I would say in every sub-department. There are some curriculum areas that are quite stable and they are in a monitoring phase. or the review is done by an outside entity. So I'll use AP courses as an example. The College Board updates the AP courses. We receive their adjustments, we recalibrate, and so that process is very compacted. There are other curriculum areas that, as I said earlier, the review, research, and writing period might take a longer period of time if we are building a new course. So an example of that at the high school level is the area of computer sciences, one of our strategic priorities. We're looking very closely at the courses that we are currently offering and considering creating courses that are, let's say, more future ready, more appropriate for the needs of our students now, and also based on the pipeline that we are trying to build 6-8 and ultimately K-8 in the area of computer science. So in that case, you are creating an entire new course. So the review and research might be the consideration of a course that might already exist somewhere else, but it might also be review and research into resources, strategies, and then we would build something from scratch. So it's very hard to give you, this is the way it always works, because it's a very purposeful approach that requires a good look at what we're currently doing, and then to consider the priority or the urgency of the adjustment.
Thank you. So I guess this is really, presenting an overview of the process and how we're going about it. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot more to come in.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in the weeks and months ahead, the sort of the drill down of that 5-year plan will be shared with boards and with the curriculum committees within the boards, because we will be involving you in the areas that are under review and gathering your input.
Right. That's great.
The takeaway is this: you don't just write a curriculum and hand it to the teachers and say, go. Sometimes you have to research what new standards, what new resources you need in a research phase. Then you are developing the curriculum. And then along the way, after you've developed it, you're developing a group with teachers so they know about it. Then you implement, and during the implementation phase, you're providing training and professional development. And then you go into a monitoring phase. So it's just making sure that we're very systematic with these 4 phases: review and resources, almost like, you're going to fly to the moon. You've got to research the rocket, you've got to develop it, you've got to launch it, and then you've got to monitor it, make sure it lands where it needs to go, right? And then this framework here, taking those 5 phases and then breaking it apart. And let's take social studies K-5. In the research phase for social studies, you may decide that you need a new textbook. And it's during that time, during the research phase, that you're researching a new textbook and you're getting board approval to put the funds behind. And so you're lining up the development of the curriculum, the researching of the curriculum, the writing of the curriculum at the same time that you have the resource that's funded, and you know when it's going to occur. In 2 years' time, we're going to need a new textbook for a particular area or a particular course, and everything comes together. The resources, the textbooks, the funding, the
So the more
PD.
comprehensive detail behind this would include the professional development that goes alongside with this cycle, and then also the budget development.
Quick question. In the monitoring phase, how long do we let a curriculum go along until we've decided perhaps we do need to change course? I mean, I know, for instance, the middle school math program had difficulties. So how long before we realize that this is going to impact, the students in it?
It really depends on the content area. So in the example that you just shared of math, that curriculum had a textbook and a digital resource attached to it, and we had a contract with a certain period of time. So when there's a contract attached to it, we are monitoring while we have a contract to include the digital resources connected with the core resource textbook. And then we're gathering feedback that entire time. So during the monitoring, it's looking at student performance. It's getting input from teachers in terms of the value of the resource, and at times getting feedback from parents as well. And so in that case, it's a pretty quick cycle. It's usually around 3-ish years. And then in other cases, there could be a curriculum that's quite stable, and the monitoring could, I would say, go on for as long as 5 years.
Because I know sometimes when we approve like a new textbook or we never, I mean, it's probably not our job, but we never hear back about how it's improved instruction or how it's going or it's not going, or that wasn't good. I mean, I don't know.
So that's very much a part of this curriculum cycle plan that we're developing. So part of the plan will develop the review period, and it will create a beginning point and an end point so that you will have a better understanding of that check-in process. And there'll never be a time where something just has a continuous arrow headed to the right, right? So that's the work that I'm doing with our department chairs at the high school in particular.
Question about kind of how this interacts with the website, or whether the website part 2 update, if you will, right? So we earlier it was mentioned that the back end is going to get connected, right? So PowerSchool is going to get connected to the website. So if I'm envisioning, say I'm an 8th grader or a parent of an 8th grader, and I need to look at course selections that follow, or even if I'm a 7th grader, I'm not sure how it is at HTMS, but in JRMS, you know, you could theoretically select electives. So how would that when would that phase be? Is that the second phase, and that the course will be updated and the student can select the course and then it should all be streamlined? Is that now? Would that be in time with the new website launching, or is that kind of the next phase?
Sure, I want to be sure I'm understanding your question. So you're asking, when the website launches in July,
Yep.
will all of the curriculum documents be updated?
That I know was the answer to no, but more of the front end of the course description, right? So theoretically, we're updating the curriculum and through this cycle.
Right.
And then families are going to be selecting theoretically through PowerSchool, which links from the website. So at what point will they see the kind of full description of the course and have, you know, be able to know what options are available to them?
Yeah, so ultimately, Sarah will provide a little bit more information. But ultimately, we would like to create a program of studies that has better digital integration. So rather than having to look for the curriculum document in a separate place, there would be more information for parents embedded in the program of studies document. So they would be able to link to gather more information rather than closing out one thing and opening another.
So Cheryl, in my previous district, we took the program study and embedded it within the course selection process. That was, that process took about 3.5 years to put all of that together and to get everything updated, stabilized, input. So I think what you're asking is, at some point, when a student goes to choose their classes, will they see a course description in PowerSchool? And the answer is that that's a long process for a whole lot of reasons. The interface to connect that is not user friendly. And so most places, most schools have them separately, because it is a heavy lift. So that is something that we have talked about. And we've started on some of that, on that work, but that's a heavy. And I think I was talking about integrating it into the studies, which is not quite as heavy.
On a slightly similar tack, not touching PowerSchool at all, with the effective program of studies, I'm familiar with the Barlow document. Questions I've gotten a lot this spring when it comes to middle school course selection, because that's when kids start to be able to choose what language am I taking, what FPAs am I taking. They're given 3 lines that say art, 3D art, general music, STEM, STEAM, and they have no idea what any of that means. So can we have even a simplified version of course of study that addresses the middle school
Yes,
curriculum.
that's very much a part of this plan, to develop a middle school version of the program of study. So there's a short course description for middle schoolers who are beginning.
Get them familiar with the idea.
So I love the plan. I like that we're being intentional about this, but I am thinking about Steinbeck and Robert Burns and the best laid plans. How do we do this when the state then comes up with, here's what you should do for reading? Here's what you should do for PE, here's what you should, and we have very little control over their cadence and the process for that.
So it absolutely, it's a very good point, and it changes the plan sometimes abruptly. So at every summer, we receive a new list of legislative mandates. And sometimes the expectation is that we need to have an almost immediate response.
Yeah.
And in that case, we might need to move something from monitor into curriculum writing. Not even a lot of time for review and research. It's really just a matter of let's sit down and get to work on this. But that is a reality of the work. And then another reality that I know you've heard about a lot is that we have to balance the urgency and the importance of this work with the people who are doing the work, which are our teachers. And so we need to be aware of pulling them out of their classrooms for work. And then how much work realistically can occur on early dismissal days and others.
Our regional educational group, what, RES, they host an annual legislator, sort of meet the school leaders conversation. And the way that manifests this year was a lot of people going, whoa, 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 hold on, slow your roll. But the cat was already out of that. I wonder if we might look to connect some very thoughtful educational leaders with them maybe now, before they start writing the next legislation, and try to raise awareness of, hey, there's a process that could be a lot more intentional. Okay.
To sort of build on John's initial point, is it fair to say that what you're proposing here and this roughly 5-year cycle is more or less industry standard among high-performing schools?
Yes, I do. I do. High-performing schools that have a much more robust curriculum leadership.
Well,
I mean, there is.
You jumped to my next question, which is, does your Department of One have adequate resources to implement a plan like this with fidelity?
That is an excellent.
Can I answer that? This is, this curriculum, this 5-year curriculum plan is a set of best practices based on research. It's very thoughtful. You can see that there are phases of development. It identifies who does the work, when the work's going to take place, and what the work is over the next 5 years. I developed a very similar model when I was the assistant superintendent in another district. And what I realized was this was a 5-year curriculum plan, and it started off with great optimism and focus around some priorities. And we were able to identify textbooks related to budget cycles and so on. What I realized was this was a 5-year curriculum plan that was going to take 10 years. And so this, however, is what we should be doing. We should be aiming for these major curriculum areas to be revised or developed over the next 5 years. Now, if we, once we've developed the plan, decide that we need to adjust the timeline or invest more resources, then you would see that emerge in our strategic plan. Our strategic plan would start to see additional action steps that you would then have to discuss as a board and throughout the budget process about what we do and how do we meet this vision. And what I had to do in my former district was, because I was very similar as district of one, was we brought in some teachers in sabbatical. We brought them out of the classroom for 1 or 2 years. They formed curriculum writing plans. We had temporary coordinators that we brought in to really energize and jumpstart some of these projects, because it is difficult for Dr. Pearson-Hugo to be the curriculum writer of one when I've explained to you before other districts have those middle layers. That doesn't matter until you have a plan. And once you have a plan, then it matters, because then it becomes a matter of, are we going to meet these goals, or are we not going to meet these goals? And so that is the answer to the question. It's to be determined, and do we need to adjust and steer and adjust our strategy?
I feel like we've heard a lot of really good forward-looking ideas and plans tonight. I'm just concerned, I think John is, that we have the capacity to carry forward the communication plan, the updated website, the updated curriculum plan, the strategic plan, all of that to carry all that water. It sounds like a lot.
So maybe we can do that, because this tonight is more a report on the work and what we're big planning, and then we'll have another session, maybe where we'll have an in-depth analysis with a plan and action steps and all that. Yeah, fair? Okay. So we will move on to item 3, which is special education leadership.
Okay, thank you. So you can see that all of these items on the agenda are actually in our strategic plan. And I'm going to take you to the next presentation, which is a kind of an in-depth look at special education leadership. And you could pass these around, John. We can go this way. And okay. So we have a handout for this presentation because there's some detail that we didn't want to miss.
Look aside the left.
Smile. I didn't hear you. There's a shot clock. Okay, we'll go. I will go. Okay, you ready? So, special education leadership is obviously important because we have 15.8% of our students in Reading who are identified as special education, 15.6% in Easton, and approximately 16.7% of their students in Region 9 are identified in the area of special education. This is reflected in, sorry, our entire priority 4 is focused on meeting the needs of all learners. So if you go back to our strategic plan, this is the bucket that really focuses on students that are at the tails of the bell curve, like, and for whatever reason. So strategic priority 4.10 was to conduct a special education study to evaluate best practices within the district. I had to start somewhere, and so I focused K-8 primarily in Easton and Reading on conducting a special education focus group. And so what we did was we identified a consultant, we conducted focus groups. The consultant observed PPTs and programs, we looked at raw data, identified trends, developed a summary, and we started to look at some of our special programs within the district. These focus groups happened between February and April, just a couple of months ago, and I started developing some priorities based on these focus groups during the April-May timeframe. I hope to fully launch this in June. However, tonight is a sneak peek of kind of some of the big picture things that I'm thinking about in terms of special education priorities. That even though the focus group is focused on K-8, you'll see have some implications for Region 9 as well. So I identified 4 main priorities. I'm working on a 5th, but here are the 4. Priority 1 is around leadership and systems. And one of the first priority is centralize. This is my mom calling from Australia. I'm not gonna get that. Yeah. Sorry about that. Centralize the director of special education. Okay, we have basically a special education director for Easton and Reading that reside in the schools, and we have a director of special education at Joel Barlow. There are 2 directors of special education among our 5 schools. Conduct a search for a K-12 director of special education. That has always been a priority. Our K-8 special education director is resigning as of June 30th. So although this was a priority for me, this accelerated the timeline. Some of the other things we're doing in this category in leadership and education is increasing disputed leadership over special education students. she won't stop calling now for 10 minutes. We want to audit existing PPT organizational structures to maximize student outcomes. We want to increase staff collaboration, and we want to increase communication around assignments and substitutes. So this is all in the leadership and system category. The next category, priority 2, is communication and family engagement. We want to increase and improve communication between special education administration and all stakeholders. We want to make sure we survey families and identify the topics that families would like to learn more about. For example, dyslexia, PPTs, parent rights and responsibilities. We want to develop a comprehensive special education website, similar to the websites you've seen tonight that are very user-friendly. And we want to focus on building relationships and partnerships between families and schools. Priority number 3 is learning environments and special programs. We want to ensure that our struggling students receive a multi-tier system of support. Dr. Pearson Hugo is working on that project at the moment with our teams. We want to design data and goal-driven IEPs that represent a blueprint for increased student success. We want to conduct program evaluations, which means basically going in and looking really deeply at our programs to see whether they're being successful. We want to develop a framework of best practices for special education services that supports the philosophy of inclusion. We want to evaluate our pre-K program. Priority 4 is around the idea of operations. We want to improve hiring notifications and public relations through LinkedIn and other means. We want to review and enhance all of our financial procedures and systems between our schools, vendor and central office. We want to review and improve excess cost database reporting and return on grants. And finally, we want to study and make changes to central office to accommodate core special education leadership staff and operations. And so priority number 4 in particular leads us to the bulk of the presentation for tonight. Currently, the leadership configuration in Easton and Reading and Region 9, I know this is difficult to see, that's why you have a handout. In Easton and Reading, you see on the left, we have the Director of Special Education that's shared between Easton and Reading. In layer A, we have a supervisor for Easton and a supervisor for Reading. So it's approximately about $145,000 for a supervisor. In layer B, we have some administrative support, administrative secretary for Easton and administrative secretary for Reading. And we have a shared administrative assistant to the director that is 0.5 Easton and Reading. Then we have our various special education staff, and we have principals, assistant principals, and principals, which are at the bottom. Our principals, our assistant principals aren't deeply involved in special education. But for some reason in Easton, Reading, and Region 9, that is not best practice. And I've worked in a lot of districts. I can tell you right now, we need to get our principals and our assistant principals more deeply involved in the special education practice. In Region 9, you'll see layer A, we have a director of special education and a department chair. In layer B, we have an administrative assistant. Layer C, we have the special education staff, and the same thing in layer D, we have principals and assistant principals, kind of present but outside of the office. That's the current leadership configuration. What I'm proposing, which is part of priority 4 in the operation tab, is to consolidate our special education directors. We currently have 2 for 3 districts. I think we only need 1. And a director for K-12 for all 3 districts. So in layer A, you would see we already have a supervisor of special education in Easton. We already have a supervisor of special education in Reading. We would add a supervisor of special education in Region 9. So every district has one supervisor of special education for each district with the K-12 director overseeing them. You can see in layer B, which is our secretaries, our administrative support. We will keep an administrative assistant for each district. However, the shared administrative assistant that was between Easton and Reading, we would collapse that into 1 position for all 3 districts, and that person would be primarily focused around special education accounting. This position is a needed area because it's an area that requires critical skills and experience. We're dealing with millions and millions of dollars in each of our 3 budgets. And I feel like a special education accountant is going to increase accountability, save money, and basically improve operations. Layer C, we have our special education staff. And I do believe that in my special education priorities, we can, in the layer D, increase engagement of our principals and our assistant principals in the PPT process by articulating a model of distributed leadership. When I was a principal for 10 years, I was in PPTs and I knew the students really well. And I was a key member of the team. At the moment, we have our administrator, our assistant principals and principals attending PPTs, but they've been driven by the directors and the supervisors. And so we need to kind of fix that model. And I have a vision to do that with them that's kind of laid out within the strategic plan. So this slide is a summary of how we would structure primarily two things. One is the director of special education is someone that sits above all three districts with a supervisor that goes in at each district. And I can talk a little bit about how the accounting would be shared between three districts. What are the benefits? Number one, coherence. We're going to have increased coherence among special education program, pre-K to grade 12, moving into students aged 22. We're no longer going to be planning in silos. That will improve transitions between, in particular, the middle school and the high school. Will increase consistency for students, increase familiarity and ownership of all students K to 12, so that students aren't seen by a district or a level, whether that level is elementary, middle, or high, or Easton, Reading, and Region 9. I think we can improve long-term budget planning for all districts, especially Region 9. We can increase accountability, knowledge, experiences, consistency associated with special ed expenditures, reporting, grants, excess costs, and ideally recoup funds. We can increase teacher and staff efficacy with a vision around training, best practices, and collaboration, which I've gone into a lot of detail in the special ed strategic plan. And bottom line, number 4, is I believe we can offer better services and save funds. So the next steps would be, first of all, your Board of Education approval, whether that's your blessing, to establish and hire a pre-K director, which we have posted for a pre-K to 12 director at the moment. The way in which I posted for that was very open-ended. Basically, we're looking for a director for the towns of Easton and Reading, which we could have gone left or right with that posting. To approve the idea of a special education supervisor in Region 9. We would have to develop a short-term MOU because we're adding a position to the Region 9 bargaining group, which is the supervisor. That will be a short-term fix for next year only, because we are going into negotiations this year for the following 3 years for Region 9. And we obviously have to develop some a kind of a description and a job description for the accountant position. So what does that cost? I've got 2 options, option A and option B. First of all, please draw your attention to column A, which is a list of kind of the positions I've talked about: the director between Easton and Reading, the director from just Region 9, the Reading supervisor, the Easton supervisor, and the Region supervisor defined on rows 4, 5, and 6, and the shared secretary, which is on line 7. If you look in column B represents what is the cost of our total of our current structure. The cost of our current structure is $694,000. I've broken that cost out to Region 9, Reading, and Easton. In column C, the current structure costs about $157,000 because we're really just looking at what the director is. The director currently is $157,000. The cost for Reading is $90,000 because you're sharing that director with Easton. You have your own Reading supervisor already at about 147,000, and you currently share the Easton and Reading secretary for around $32,600. In column E are the current costs for Easton, which are similar to the costs of Reading. You're sharing the director, you have your own supervisor for about 145,000, and you're sharing the shared Easton and Reading secretary. Column F is a really important column. It describes what the cost is net, all three districts. It's actually savings of approximately $2,000. So if we did a director between Easton, Reading, and Region 9, it'd be 190,000. You no longer need the director in Region 9, that's 0. The Reading supervisor and the Easton supervisor doesn't change. You'll be adding a Region 9 supervisor for about 135,000. Now I put it in there at 135,000. We would probably budget at the same level as at the same level as Easton and Reading at around the $145,000 mark. And the $145,000 mark is not only equal to what the supervisors are in Easton and Reading currently. I also looked at the Region 9 contract, and the Region 9 contract has a director level of counseling. And I would use that director level of counseling and slot in the supervisor level, which would be lower than the director level at the director level of counseling position. That would be about 145,000. The reason why it's listed at 135,000 is because I don't anticipate hiring that position until the end of August, September. So that is why it's probably around about 135,000, because I would have a new director hire the supervisor. The shared secretary now would be, the accountant would be about 75,000 in total. So the net cost described in column F would be about 692,000. Yeah.
And column G, the Region 9 supervisor for 6, is it 133 or 135?
I apologize. That is, I took a picture of an earlier slide, it'd be 135. So column G would be, now if we broke it out, you saw what the cost is net. Let's break it out in silos for each district. The cost for column G would be 63,000, because now you're sharing the $193,000 director. You're adding in supervisor. And if you're sharing the accountant at a $75,000 level, it'll be $25,000 each. So the total 229,000, that's a plus 69,000 for Region 9. In Reading, in column H, you can see that it's a negative 34,000. And in Easton, it's a negative 32,600. If you look in the orange, there are options for how we could potentially fund the special ed accountant. The shared secretary between Easton and Reading is already in Easton and Reading's budget. So if you split, what I'm proposing is that you would take that 65,000 and increase $70,000, which would be what I would say would be a market amount for an accountant. So 75 divided by 3 is $25,000 per district. But because Easton and Reading already have a position somewhat, and we're just adding to it slightly, I've broken it out for you in rows 10, 11, 12, and 13, what it would look like as a 3-way split and versus a 2-way split. So a 3-way split would be $25,000 per district, which is what I've identified in G, H, and I, and potentially what it would be if we kept it as a 2-way split, which would minimize column G, which is the $64,000 increase to Region 9. So my next slide is an effort to kind of bring down Region 9's expenses a little bit by keeping the funding of the accountant in Easton and Reading, because Easton and Reading is already saving on the cost sharing of the director, and you already have that in your budget. So that's an example of how we can play with the numbers to get it down. In reality, it's a cost savings to Reading and Easton. It's an increase to Region 9. However, Easton and Reading, Region 9, the taxpayers, I think it washes out net. And so that is how kind of the structure works. If we went with kind of this model, again, which is the K-5 director, a supervisor in each building, an administrative secretary in each building, cutting an administrative staff member and creating the accountant level position. So I know I went fast, but that is kind of an overview of the change, which was in my strategic priorities anyway. But the reason why this wasn't in the budget proposal was because we had a resignation, and whenever you have a change in staff, it's an opportunity to reorganize the chairs on the deck.
This makes a lot of sense, just looking at it. Is there a historical reason, Dr. Yvonne, why wasn't it done before?
I think that you actually did it in the past, and there was a time when you had a director, and when you were hiring a director, and I believe you almost went with a K-12 director probably 5 years ago. Whatever reason, that didn't pan out, and you have the two directors.
There was a time when there were actually 3 different silos, so special education, and then Easton and Reading were combined.
So
I
it's
want
just
to say 7, 8 years.
historical.
I think part of the history is when you have 2 incumbents, it's hard to join forces without making one of them lose a seat. And when you have an opening, it gives you the opportunity to say, let's consolidate.
And I think you spoke a lot to the benefits to the students and to the program overall, but is there any do we anticipate there's any opportunity for potentially greater efficiencies in this model where maybe much of the additional expense is offset by additional grant opportunities or additional
Well, I can tell you that I truly believe we can be much more efficient and surgical in excess costs in the way in which we report costs and try to recoup costs. And there are a lot of examples in the last 12 months, we've talked about this many times, where we are like, wow, we could have done that better. We could have captured more expenditure. And we come across those as examples of just where, you know, if we were smarter and more experienced in this particular area across 3 districts, this would be a huge cost savings.
right?
Then the
So
other side of that, I would say, is program planning. So when you have one team planning a program, especially for our students with the most complex programs, I think there is definitely an opportunity for efficiency because the students are not transitioning at the end of one district and then moving to another. So I think that there is certainly some hope that we would be able to keep more students in district by having a coherent pre-K program.
So improving the structure improves delivery of services to students, but it also creates greater opportunities for efficiencies and cost savings on the back end, which may offset the additional costs entirely or you know, at least help to offset it.
And that's without even going to what you mentioned, which is grant, so grant opportunities, which could be additional sort of opportunity.
And there's not even that much cost to offset.
Right.
Just system-wide, it's neutral.
Right.
So it's an all, it's a plus situation.
And if Easton and Reading step up to say, hey, we'll figure out how to take on more for the 23-24 budget season, then we might be able to reduce the impact to Region 9.
So it's either 81K or 40K to Region 9.
Well, you know,
Say it was 65 or.
Well, no, but I believe the supervisors.
you can slide this in, you can, you know, just like the budget process.
I mean, negotiate what you want to negotiate.
Yeah, it's like. Okay.
I've got 3 questions. Let me jump in. So is this K-12 director, it's not a central office position, is that correct?
Can you repeat that, Tom?
Is the K-12 director of special education is not a central office position?
Well, I would house them in central office. And, in next year's budget, it's not a central office position because it's budgeted separately, right now, and it's in the PPS cost center. I would argue that it would stay in the PPS cost center. I mean, we may disagree on that. The whole idea of central office and the central office cost center is only unique to here. You know, so I think I answered your question. So I would say the person will be housed in central office with the accountant there for next year. And then how you budget for that in the future, we have to talk about.
And then my second question, would all three boards have a chance to interview or at least talk to the candidate before they're filled in the position? Because I'm assuming you're going to hire the person as the superintendent.
Absolutely. We have 7 or 8 applications at the moment. And I don't know for sure whether the application portal has closed. It's either closing or it's going to close soon. And we would like a committee that had representation from the boards. And I can tell you that the candidate pool is not strong in this particular area. It's just a difficult position to fill. You know, like a superintendent, you're trying to find someone that has experiences in those type of activities. And there's just not a lot of candidates out there. So we've got 7 candidates and maybe 2 or 3 candidates that are pretty strong. Okay, closes May 30th.
And who would this person report direct, would they report into?
The special ed, the director of special ed will report directly to me. And then the supervisors of special ed will report to the director and so on. Yeah.
And would you look for a candidate, given the hope for efficiencies? Would you look for a candidate with expertise in gaining and finding efficiencies?
Would I look for a candidate
Specifically,
in having, would I look for a candidate in having experience in?
who's been successful in being very efficient with grants, funding, all of that stuff? Would you specifically look for that as a, and you know, as a candidate strength?
Absolutely. I think we would design kind of redesign the job description K-12. And based on that redesigned job description, we would come up with questions around certain domains around leadership, domains around the technical expertise of special education, domains, questions around finance, grants. It's a key position. We would get very detailed into how have you saved money on excess costs? How have you captured and coded excess costs in your previous experience? Absolutely, that would be a key facet of the interview process.
So earlier in the presentation, which is very good, by the way, you mentioned that you want a stronger relationship between what I'll call SPED services and the principal. So how would that change from what is being done currently?
Well,
or maybe is it dotted line, is it matrix reporting, or how would that be strengthened?
This is my workspace for the special ed priorities, and you can see that, it's very hard to see, but within the leadership and systems category, I have 7 goals, and within the 7 goals of 7 priorities, I have these additional action steps, and the action steps are very detailed. And so we would be looking for a leader that has experience in the field that can identify or develop a PLC, a professional learning community, and come up with a 3-year plan in professional development in the area of special education, for example. That would be one of the smaller action steps as part of one of the priorities in number 1.
And then the second question is in relation to net. I know the cost is relatively neutral, slight decrease, but the net change in full-time equivalents is essentially, is that neutral too? If I count the open think you mentioned the council position that was open at Barlow. But if I count all the kind of classes, if you will, that's 14 FTEs across the 3 districts, right? And then essentially, it sounds like accounting that's happening not by an accountant is now going to be centralized in accounting. So I just want to make sure I understand.
It's actually net, it's budget neutral and headcount
It
neutral.
is, okay.
The shared secretary.
The shared secretary, we would eliminate that position. And we would come up with a job description around the idea of an accountant. And that person would be, can apply for the new position. But the positions aren't guaranteed.
So, you don't necessarily have to resolve it here, but in the next Region 9 meeting, I would like to discuss, even though it is net neutral across all 3 districts, it is an increase of about 66,000 to Region 9, which I'd like to figure out where that's coming out of next year's budget. We budgeted $66,000 for this change, so we need to figure out which projects it's going to come out. We decide what we're doing.
I think, Reading and Easton, probably pretty comfortable with the second option where you guys would only.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's 40,000 is a lot easier to find than 66, so we appreciate that. If we decide that, but we still need to figure out where it's going to come from.
I do want to caution history repeating itself on this, which is that we had a tri-board meeting 5 years ago where we agreed to move forward with a K-12 special ed director. Then, for a different reason, Region 9 took the position they weren't comfortable going forward with that anymore. And so what I'm hearing is that at the next Region 9 meeting, you want to have a discussion about how you're going to fund this, which gives me pause that if we all agree to go forward here, there might be a point where Region 9 says no because of the $40,000. So I would feel more comfortable if we left here, you're all knowing we're going forward or not.
I think that's reasonable. I'm not saying not to, we wouldn't make a decision here. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that if we need to figure out where we're going to find 40,000 or 66,000, if we agree to do this evening, and you don't have that same problem. So
I agree that we have different problem, but I just don't want anything tonight to be sort of conditional in the sense that we're all back here in a month having an argument about it.
I would take the middle ground, if you will, especially for those of us who were not there. You know, there are always some of us that are left that were part of that discussion that I do not want to repeat again. But I guess in terms of being constructive moving forward, I mean, if I can just remind my colleagues, essentially the Barlow budget is split between the 2 towns. I mean, shift and people move it a little bit, right? So I think in comment to what Christian said, I mean, we should probably close this off tonight, but what I see as one individual vote on Region 9 is inconsequential to the tax commission. At the end of the day, it's neutral.
I
And we're
would
getting better
go as
service.
far as to say that if it came down to making it so that it was cost neutral to Reading, and if Easton agreed that it was cost neutral to Easton, we'd be contributing $40,000 right over to it, and it would be budget neutral across the board, because as Cheryl said, it's the same taxpayers. We have budgets that are approved. If that means we're owning the whole cost of the accountant, and we're owning in year 1 the marginal difference of the K-12 director, it all comes out in the wash when we sit down in January and reset the budgets.
And then there's no math for Region 9 to do.
Right.
no, there's still is, because we have to figure out where we're taking the 40.
I just basically get that.
We can find somebody.
You don't have to find it.
Yeah.
What I heard Chris say, is this what you said, Chris? You know, you potentially could look at column row 2 here. And you could change these numbers.
Correct.
Because the sheer matter of it is Region 9, right, Easton's got a larger proportion, right? The way our allocation is set, going to repeat again next year, right? So if we shift the actual dollars, most of the dollars to Reading, it'll be neutral. And then Easton will pick up the higher allocation of Region 9, and there'll be no change to anybody's budget.
Right, you split the
Right,
63
yeah.
2 ways, and so 190 goes 85 each, or whatever the number is, and you kind of get to the same place.
No, and I appreciate the creativity and the generosity of everyone, but
We don't agree with that. By the way.
mean, I'm more, you know, keep things within your budgets, you know, but
benefit for the town, so.
I understand that. I understand that. I think that we can still get to where we want to go and, you know, I don't know that we need to do as much creativity, though it is appreciated. And, you know, again, I think as far as coming to a consensus tonight towards a K-12 director is really the focus here. I think the other positions fall frankly within the discretion of the administration anyway, how they work them out, although the funding obviously comes from the three boards. I do feel like, again, and I'm not gonna go into this too much, but the issues we had in the past were based upon process issues that were created by the superintendent at the time. And so there was never a consensus to go. There was an agreement to go to a K-12 director. However, an employee was hired under a different title without participation from all the boards, and that's what the
Talk about what it is.
So what I'm saying is that there was never a reneging that occurred. So moving forward, I think the question for tonight is a K-12 director, yes or no? And then we can figure out the funding.
Yes, and perhaps the formation of the hiring committee of the whole, and then the specific hiring.
That's fair too, if you wanna go that far as to designate who's on the, you know, representation.
I would also speak to the concern from the past, right, is like, hey, let's make sure that we have the right structure in place to go do, so that we have the right participation.
Right.
Well, John, I think it's not the board's chair responsibility to pick.
Yes, but usually for the purposes, for these positions, we have been recently creating a committee of the whole so that everyone can participate in the executive session that where we sort of talk about, you know, so what we think, but then we also create a committee that's specifically dedicated to the work of the interviewing, et cetera.
Yes, yes,
You could have the superintendent hire and conduct the search process and hire, there's no meetings, there's no executive sessions, and just have board members sit on superintendent's committee, the search, have, you know, 2 or 3 members on each. You do it that way.
I'm more open to any process that everyone agrees to.
I will say.
So phase one is there agreement to direct the superintendent to create this position and fill it? Step 2 is what's the degree of involvement do the 21 of us want in that process?
Could you make a motion to set the superintendent's recommendation?
I think that sounds.
Or I think rather than just one position, wouldn't it be for plan A? Because there's more than just one position here, there's a lot of.
That gets into a.
Yeah, I
Mike's comment.
I think Mike, I agree with Mike that the superintendent has discretion to make the sort of changes further down, but
The board didn't create the joint secretary position, and the board doesn't need to create its replacement.
I think
But cabinet level officials would probably need to have that direction.
Okay. That works. Let's try it. Seriously.
who's got the motion?
I don't, well, I have a bastardized version of all of that, but I would entertain a motion to authorize Dr. McKinnon to proceed with a reorganization of special education, which includes the hiring of a K-12 director in order to address strategic priority 4.10.
Wow.
So for Reading,
You like what Randy said, Mike?
For Reading, yes.
And second, Sherrod.
Anyone from Region 9 on the same?
I'll move it for Region 9.
There's a second. Second by Mary Lee. Okay, discussion.
Just to clarify, is it K through 12 or pre-K through 12? It's in the document.
Oh, pre-K.
District one.
no, that's a good point. I would amend the motion to reflect the.
That's what I heard.
Inclusion.
Yes.
Yeah, same comments.
Discussion. I think,
So, like being in Easton for 7 years, it's the only complaint I ever hear about our schools is special education. So I'm just thankful you're taking, like, you talk to families, we've heard about it in our board meetings. But I don't hear almost anything bad about our schools, but special education comes up. And a family has been through our process. It is almost unanimously not positive. They'll say the teacher is good, but the process is bad. And I think it's just indicative of also other challenges. I think it could cost us a lot of money if we don't clean this up because of lawsuits and other challenges. So it's not just the money we can save in grants, it's the money we save by not going through litigation, going to mediation, potentially getting sued. So thank you for addressing this in this way with the strategic plan, but also like the reorganization, taking the opportunity of having someone who is resigning and turning that into potentially a positive for the districts.
This makes all the sense in the world. If you were to design a district from the ground up, you would never come up with what we have right now.
We have a motion on the floor.
yeah, all around. Yes, is the motion, we gonna vote?
Good, huh?
Aye.
Think so?
Calling the question and writing to staff, are you still with us?
I am, yes.
Unanimous 7-0, right?
Region 9, all in favor? Okay. And on to item D.
Board involvement.
I thought you were all in favor of the superintendent committee and everybody, committee of the whole.
Two different things. So if we want to, if we're creating a committee, we need a motion. If we're not, we don't.
I think we'll.
Let's not.
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah.
Up to you. You want a committee? I go for the other. Cleaner. Superintendents, everyone.
We'll join his committee.
We will entertain members to join you and.
Right.
In the.
Yes, so just, on May 30th, the application window will close. We will probably screen candidates internally, develop a pool of candidates, and there'd probably be a 3 to 4 step process. And I would probably need 2 or 3 members from each board, maybe 2 members from each board. And we would go through the 3 steps, 3 or 4 steps process. I can keep you informed and define what the 4 steps will be. Screening interviews, in-person interviews, it could be a performance task of some kind, and so on. And I can fully develop that and write it and develop kind of a plan for what that looks like. It would involve staff and parents and so on.
Great.
So members of boards interested in doing that.
Exactly.
You know, let chairs know, and if there's more than 2 or 3 people interested, we'll find a fair way to appoint people.
How can we put me on the list?
Send me an email.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item D. I've already lost $20 donations. Regionalization pathways. This is an item that was requested at our last joint meeting venture, and so I'll hand over to Mr. Parkin if he wants to be.
I just shared the slides to the Zoom. Can you put the Zoom on the screen?
Three slides with that.
Just a minute or two. Depending how you're round.
Also, at this point, any members of the administration who had their fill or welcome to leave with that. And before anyone goes, I do want to express our appreciation for your presentation tonight and the fine work as far as the website, curriculum, and communication. That was really great. And I don't think we express enough appreciation for that hard work, so thank you.
I don't know if you want to hold, at least Dr. McKinnon, in case he's needed the executive session of the discussion of the contract.
Again, fine.
So I'll get started. This is a follow-up on comments that I made at this meeting in January about my view that it's important to look long and hard at the question of regionalization. And I think we probably heard a half a dozen or a dozen times tonight, some flavor of the, we wouldn't be having this conversation in a normal school district kind of theme. That whole process of discussing a K-12 director would not have happened in a traditional school district that's not run in a trilateral way like our three districts are. And so over the course of the 6 years that I've been on the board, time and time again, we lose time, energy, money, and attention and effort over the fact that we are running things in triplicate when we don't need to do things in triplicate. And so to sort of put my slide where my mouth was in January, the current structure has a number of significant limitations. We have 2 or 3 times the number of board meetings that would exist in a single K-12 district. Turnover is high and time spent on meetings trapped by administration diverts from their core function as educational leaders. There are 3 times the budget, 3 times the reporting. It also bars optimal staff assignments. You can't assign teachers between Staples and RES like we could if we were a regional district, which results sometimes to ripping teachers we want to keep and keeping teachers maybe we don't want to keep. We have no shared pre-K-12 vision from a board level because we have 3 districts that sometimes pull together, sometimes pull in opposite directions, and sometimes pull in just slightly different directions. Our trilateral structure incentivizes micromanagement. We have an absurd 100-to-1 student to board member ratio. We have divergent spending priorities and capacities, which can create friction. For example, there are some years where the Easton Board of Finance is particularly harsh on the Easton K-8 budget. There are other years where that's the case in Reading, which can result in things like not having sufficient capacity to keep up with technology across our K-8 school districts. And it changes our refresh cycle and it just creates friction and minimizes opportunities. It leads to inefficient spending. We have tons of redundancy of services due to silos, and there is high degrees of public confusion and disengagement. Most people in these towns have no idea the difference between these 3 boards or what ER9 is or what any of this is. What are the benefits of a single district? We reduce governance inefficiencies. We simplify the budget process enormously. We simplify compliance. We create staffing flexibility that is common in larger districts. We significantly blunt the impact of the current Region 9 allocation swings on taxpayers. And if you think about that, the reality is that when Region 9 is simply a $25-ish million budget, as opposed to a $60-ish million budget, the swing of a couple of students creates a several $100,000 swing in taxation either way. Economies of scale would mute some of those enormous year-over-year swings and the impact that they have on our budgets. We can have a common vision and common resource allocation. We can encourage public participation in a cohesive school community that runs pre-K through 12. Economies of scale create efficiencies that weren't previously there. And there may at some point be benefits in adjusting geographic boundaries in the way that we feed our elementary and middle schools. How do you get there? This is the D'Agostino question. How do you get there? There are 2 statutory mechanisms that currently exist. Mechanism A is simply expand Region 9. How do you do that? If the Easton Board and the Reading Board vote to recommend a study that Region 9 expand to be a pre-K-12 district, this recommendation goes to the boards of finance in both towns, and a committee must be formed to review that recommendation. Within a year, the study committee makes a recommendation. If it recommends expansion of Region 9, a referendum is held in both towns, and if it passes, the districts commence a merger in accordance with the committee's recommended plan. Notably, this is the same mechanism that is used to withdraw grades back after you expand a region. Alternately, the somewhat more complex version is to simply create a new region. And that would require the 3 districts, not the 3 boards, but the 3 districts to vote to establish a study committee, which would be a district meeting of Region 9 and a special town meeting of Reading and Easton. The boards can also conduct a preliminary study in lieu of having town and district meetings to have a pre-discussion of whether or not to recommend a regionalization discussion. You can see the whole thing runs on from there. There's a 2-year process. Committee makes a recommendation. It also ends in a referendum in both towns. If the towns split, one town says yes, the other town says no, the committee can say, that's great, we're gonna vote again. And if it passes, then it's adopted. If it fails, then it's shelved again. What are the financial benefits of regionalization? There's improved certainty around financial planning. There's one board that governs the schools instead of 5, or 3 school boards and our 2 boards of finance. We incentivize cost saving because a regional school district that runs pre-K-12 would have the capacity to roll funds over and meet needs where they exist and as they present. Instead of circumstances where, for example, there's a health insurance crunch in one district, but not the other. One district is forced to cut programs while the other can spend excess funds on enhancing programs. There's a 10% construction bonus that is associated with regionalization. If a newly regionalized district is formed or a district is expanded, there is a 10 percentage point reimbursement increase on school construction projects from the state. So right now, if you're getting 30 points in a project, if you regionalize for a couple of years after that regionalization, you get 40 points coming back on that project. And I think everybody in the room knows that we're likely to need significant capital investment in both towns in aging school infrastructure sooner rather than later. In addition, the economies of scale will likely reduce the excess cost reimbursement threshold, which will dovetail with Dr. McKinnon's goals of increasing the amount that special ed is reimbursable. We'll also enjoy protection from potential state aid penalties that have been associated with small districts who refuse to regionalize. And I don't think the issue is dead in the legislature. It will come back again, that small districts like ours will be targeted for mandated regionalization. We should get ahead of that before we lose state funding on account of not being regionalized. What's the catch? There's no statutory mechanism for handling collectively bargaining contracts. Right now, we have 12 or 13 unions. How do you turn 3 teachers unions into 1 without them all getting paid at the JBEA rate? It's not easy. And I can talk for an hour about legislative solutions that I can think of, but it's obviously an issue. Change is hard. The process is time consuming. It's grueling, but the long-term benefits are arguably very positive. The third issue that have to be resolved is existing debt would have to be negotiated because right now the towns of Easton and Reading hold municipal debt for those buildings. Region 9 obviously holds debt for this building. Some measure of negotiation would go into who ultimately owns those notes at the end of a regionalization. So what are the next steps coming off of this activity and why am I having this conversation? The boards can determine that regionalization is simply not worth pursuing. They determine that regionalization is worth pursuing, but only with more information or some legislative assistance, special acts of legislature that could help grease some of these skids. We could form a preliminary study committee to determine if a formal committee should be recommended to the towns. Easton and Reading can act on their own to recommend a study group regarding expansion of Region 9, or the 3 boards can vote to recommend a committee be formed to study creating a new region all along. So 12 years ago, one of many times that this issue has been raised to the 3 boards, Evan Pickoff wrote that district administrators are concerned that they may not be able to keep the superintendent for a significant amount of time in the future due to the pressures of the job as created by the tri-board structure and the resulting multiplicity of the workload. In that time, we've had 5 superintendents. And I think I'd like to keep it at 5 for as long as we can. So that's as fast as I can, the summary of what I think the sort of pathways to regionalizing these districts are. And so for the purposes of tonight, I'm not proposing that any action be taken in any one direction or another. Rather, what I'm looking for is the consensus of the room and different boards as to which of these steps they are most closely aligned with or are moved by. And if the answer is that it's a dead on arrival issue, it's a dead on arrival issue. If the answer is that there's more interest or work to be done, I'm happy to carry that load and have conversations with legislators to figure out some of the catch issues, et cetera. So, go ahead.
So having been on the Reading board and on the Region 9 board, I 100% agree that the way this board functions without having to wrangle with the arbitrary numbers set by Board of Finance that sometimes has no idea what the internal pressures are, it is fantastic. And I agree with almost everything that you said, but I did get caught up on what's the catch point one. Because I think that's really the elephant in the room.
Yep.
And so for me,
Union
yeah,
contract.
I think it's a lot of, this is reminding me a lot about the start time debate. It's like, sure, it's just, there's an easy solution. It's just lots and lots of money. And I'm sorry, it's a little late, I'm being, and I'm also been at this for a long time. So before I would personally want to invest a huge amount of our time, Jason's, everybody's time, I would want to find out how we handle that, because I don't see a political appetite in either of the towns for the likely increase in contractual obligations that this would.
I think
And that's,
if you took this to a planning committee and the planning committee says, yeah, this is a great idea, here's how you do it, everybody pays Barlow wages, it's gonna cost everybody $1.5 million. It's obviously dead on arrival at a referendum. I think that's
right.
abundantly clear. But at the risk of droning on, I will briefly explain what I've sort of soft pedaled to some legislators as a solution to this, because I've explained to them that they want regionalization to happen, because it's in the state's interests to regionalize some of these small districts that are relatively inefficient, but they're all gonna run into the same problem. And so how do you solve this? And so if you figure we've got 3 sets of contracts and you're gonna have a high, a middle, and a low, I would propose that you create a 4th union. And the 4th union in this case is Region 9A. Let's go. And Region 9A applies to every new employee hired by the new regionalization. They are represented by CEA, and they form a first contract. And my guess is the first contract is gonna come in somewhere between the high and the low, probably around where the middle is. And that's gonna apply to all the new staff. Anybody who's currently in JDEA, REA, or EEA can stay there as long as they want. But once the Region 9A contract is ratified, if you want to join that because the benefits are better, you have a one-way ticket into Region 9A. And over time, the other unions fall off due to retirements and people leaving the district, and you have a period of probably 15 years where you've got 3 unions, the top, the middle, and the new one, because the low one's gonna go away as soon as they all jump to the new one. And attrition is going to solve your problem over time. And instead of having to write one big check, you're gonna get there the other way.
Is that how other places have done it?
No, I didn't mention this. Nobody is though. So that would take an act of legislature probably, because otherwise it's an enormous collective bargaining lift, because the folks who have been in bargaining sessions with one unit know that it's its own challenge without having 3 units all there.
What would happen to our town? Because I know there was some discussion maybe a year or 2 ago about combining with Monroe. Was that the one I heard?
This is a defensive move, by the way, that would possibly protect us from that kind of thing, where the state comes in and says, guess what? You're a new region and these are new boundaries.
You're aligning to the probate court, or you're aligning to, there's a lot of different schemes that have been floated.
Put it together.
Easton goes to Monroe and Humboldt, and Reading goes to Richfield.
Exactly. And that's what I was sort of hinting at, that the regionalization, forced regionalization waves have not turned into a flood this session, but they haven't gone away. And the next time a governor or a legislature is looking to find efficiencies or find a way to use leverage, it's a question of, sorry, we're gonna cut your construction grants in half, we're gonna cut your ECS entirely. If you don't meet these thresholds, you're a district of under 3,000 students, 2,000 students, whatever it is, you don't count as far as we're concerned.
And if that doesn't sound like reality, just look at Vermont.
Yeah.
They did it.
Right.
Which is, I think Connecticut is more predisposed to the arguments that work in Vermont.
We have an opportunity to somewhat control our destiny.
That's right.
So Chris, you mentioned the active legislature, make this 4th union as well. What if that doesn't work? So what are the options then?
I mean, the options are either write the big check, or we.
I'll fill in the gap. But only for Reading. John's taking care of it.
It's a negotiated solution. I think it has to be a negotiated solution. I think there are a whole bunch of downstream potential savings that even if you didn't have to write the big check, if you had to write a check, it'll come out in the wash in what you're saving in efficiencies and quality on the backside. But that's a tougher lift than if you start with, we've built a legislative solution to fix this. And that's kind of why I'm not here saying, let's all vote to form a committee.
Right.
What I'm here to listen to is it worth the effort to try to solve what's the catch number one? To make this a possible future.
Is that option one or the path one, it seems shorter, is that fair?
Mhm.
That we just become, you know, we
Yeah,
open up Region 9 and then we merge.
That is faster as a 1 year period. It starts within 30 days of the Easton and Reading board saying, let's do this. I think Region 9's involvement in that is, I think the Region 9 chair gets to appoint somebody to that committee that would include finance and education members of both towns.
Catch number two is, what about the finance boards in each town? That would kind of like figure into the.
I mean, they figure into it as much as they would sit on the committee that discusses whether or not this makes sense.
Right.
Obviously, in a world where Region 9 was pre-K-12, the Easton and Reading boards of finance would have considerably less authority, let's say. They would be managing just the municipal budgets.
But what I'm saying is, so you imagine they would fight this kind of thing?
It depends. I think it depends on our ability to show them. I think in Easton, I can't speak for Reading because I haven't been involved there, but in Easton, I think we've made a really the concentrated effort to make sure that we're being transparent, that we're not hiding anything. We're showing them, and I think Dr. McKinnon's efforts and Sarah's efforts to create, do the spreadsheet, make it available. We passed our budget, with no deductions this year. And I think it's because they're saying, we believe you. We don't think you're trying to hide anything. We believe you. And I think this doesn't change anything about that mandate. We have to stay transparent. We have to make sure that the voters know exactly what's going on.
I think Karen's right to say, what will they think about this?
Yeah.
Because I think that the knee-jerk instinct is, well, no, because I'm ceding authority and I already have this sort of healthy sense of distrust of the process, and I am a check on that authority. And if we let these school boards just go, they're gonna pass budgets of $1 gazillion and, we're all gonna go broke. I think that ultimately is solved for politically. I think to John's point, if you bring forward a plan that says, here's the plan that's gonna improve quality and reduce cost. Any member of that board of finance who says, well, that sounds bad, is left to look silly. Their remedy, if they want to be involved in that process, is run for the Region 9 school board and manage the $65 million budget of the Region 9 school board. And I think ultimately, if you were to move in that direction, the makeup of the people who would sit on the Region 9 board at that point would be more of a mix than they are now with respect to vested interest in school versus vested interest in fiscal responsibility. And there are pros and cons to that. I think that's the likely path that takes.
I think you can also point to Mike and Todd's leadership over the last several years, and that hasn't manifested like that. Like, these are not spendthrifts.
Well, it's like a good example of, if you're not gonna go, people aren't gonna ask for 20% increases, like that's not real.
It's not
You
right.
have really good examples of that,
No, but
like
they
you
don't
know what, the increase was under 1% this year, right? So.
Right.
Exactly.
But ultimately, whether they like the loss of control or not, it's the 7,000 people in Easton and the 9,000 people in Reading who decide who has that control.
We didn't get the unanimous votes that we
You've got-
barely, we had a really good turnout across the
Yeah.
board and support of all of the budgets. So the demographic is shifting and there's a lot of engagement because of the education.
Is there an appetite for this across the London population?
I don't think, I'm sorry to cut you off, but you said it in your.
I
Understand people to understand that this board is not ER9. This board is Region 9. This is E, this is R, this is 9.
Here for 20 years, we vote on budgets every year.
Yeah.
Like, we're at stage 0 of that, but I think that
This sounds very good from 30,000 feet. Let me give you a point on number one and a point on number two. Easton is at the bottom of the salary grade.
it's getting closer.
So anything, well, congratulations, good luck. But Easton is at the bottom. So that's gonna be an immediate cost increase. If they go to R9A and they go to the middle ground, which I think is Reading. And so that's gonna be a huge increase, a huge dollar amount. Secondly, we have this existing debt. If you were at the, and I don't know why you would have been, but if you were at the Easton Town meeting, you saw how the town has worked very hard to reduce the debt, which has been able to keep the increases in the mill rate lower. And that's all going to disappear because.
Well, it's not required to disappear. So let's assume, and this is just made up numbers, that Easton is carrying $5 million in school-related debt right now, and Reading is carrying $10 million in school-related debt. You merge the districts and you convert the debt into Region 9 debt. Now suddenly they're at $7.5 million each. Well, that's not fair. And I agree with you, that's not fair. When I say you have to negotiate it, you've got to talk about how each of the towns continue to hold that and what the regional district is paying to which of those towns to buy those notes back. And there's a way to do it that just says, we're going to hold you harmless to the debt levels that you have right now. And all future bond issues, whether it's to spend $10 million at Keller or $10 million at John Reed, that's going to be split proportionally across the towns because they are regional district properties at that point. But I think you go into that and say the only thing that is owned by Region 9 and split proportionally is the Barlow debt until day one. And you just have to figure out mechanically who's buying the debt, who's writing what back, and how you tackle it.
So Mike, I ask you, what is your debt?
I'm ready to be
You
more.
got 4.5
What
million.
is our debt right now?
Yes.
Well, it's 9 million plus the 4.5, it's like 13.5.
So
Or will be.
Easton would get 53.6 of that.
Yes, because it's on the.
You'd be paying 53.6 of the debt service, you already are.
Already are.
Right.
Right.
We're already responsible for that.
Whether we do
Yeah, you
this
don't
or
pay
not,
the whole-
does not change the Region 9 debt service.
Exactly.
Jeff,
Service for that year.
a point about number one.
Yeah.
I think when you combine and become one district, that year one increase, if it's, you might feel like it's all Easton, but it's the district. It would be, Easton, if the increase is all on Easton, technically, it's a 50% discount, right? Because Reading would be picking that up.
But we're picking up half. That
We'd be picking up half the increase.
Oh, that's a good point.
I think part of the challenge is we're dealing with numbers that we're making up in our mind versus
Right.
like, if we were
Real
to
numbers.
at least begin to the process of like, let's look at the numbers and look at the difference and
If it's
see.
worse, 5 years.
And I would be,
Exactly. Now is the time.
if there's the appetite for this, I'd be glad to model it and say, here's what we're paying in Easton, here's what we're paying in Reading, here's how because the allocation, you said 53%. I'm not sure that if you looked at Easton and Reading combined pre-K-12, it'd be 53.47. You'd have a different allocation rate because you'd be counting everybody.
Total
who's
students.
bused.
Right.
Yeah. And it would move less year over year because
Could be higher.
Must be.
I think Easton would probably go to 55 or 56.
I think so.
But it would probably stick there for 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 years without a huge variance.
I'd love to talk more about how we can research this, whether it's a committee or
What's the next
one of
step?
the options, rather than us
Right.
trying to figure
Yeah,
it
so
out.
not those numbers, because I think until we know those numbers.
So, Mike,
And before we get there, I commend everyone. I mean, everyone has the best intentions. We all really would love to find an easy solution and a path forward. I'm just gonna tell you, Gwen brought up the time study. This is just like the time change thing. Even in a perfect scenario, when we combine all the districts, we're not gonna solve all the problems that we think, You've had Easton Reading joint meetings in the past. And everyone thinks, oh, this will be great because it'll be half the amount of time. We'll get everything done, but the meeting just is twice as long. And you're gonna dovetail in the high school, and instead of having one meeting, 3 meetings a month, you're gonna have 2 meetings that take 4 hours apiece. There's so many so many challenges with this. And my concern is that, look, I would love to solve so many issues with our school districts. Obviously at Region 9, we're working on certain initiatives right now, and I know that the 2K to 8 districts are also working on other initiatives. And so anything moving forward, I just want to make sure that it doesn't turn into what the time change thing will turn into, and then we have, you know, our superintendent looking for a new job because he's spending all of his time on this. So, and I know it's our hope that that won't happen, that we'll be able to do a lot of this behind the scenes. But the other thing I just want to caution everyone to, it was, I think it was in the late 70s, that's a long time ago.
When you just got on the board?
Probably, a vote came up, it went down 7-1 as far as regionalizing, okay? There's a lot of challenges. Easton has new school buildings and lower budgets. Reading has older buildings and spends more year to year. You open yourself up for a lot of other challenges. The thing that we deal with at Region 9 that, you know, everyone thinks is, you know, it's great. Well, it was great for Reading this year because we saved them 600,000, and Easton wanted to lynch me when I went there because you're plus 600,000. That's gonna hit your K to 12 districts now. So each town, you're gonna run into 1 year where one town doesn't want to vote for the increase because they're really getting walloped in the other town.
But you're reducing that by at least 70%. Because you've expanded the number of students by triple.
It's still gonna happen. It's still gonna happen.
Like, do you want to do it at your discretion or the state's discretion?
That's the big thing.
Yeah.
Well, so again, yeah. We can worry about the state coming in and telling us that. And we can have differing opinions because I think that there's a political aspect of it that the state's just not gonna come in and do that to us. I think a lot of times they, you know, they blow smoke and there's nothing there, but who's right or who's wrong, we don't know. I mean, I can act like I know, but nobody really knows. The reality though is that this is an incredibly challenging issue, and that this will occupy huge amount of time, and it could backfire. We do have a lot of support now within the community for our, you know, communication and our transparency. But how will, you know, again, we look at demographics and you know, of each town, and you know, we all think that, you know, Easton is turning blue and Reading is swayed much bluer. But we still, I know in Reading, a large part of the population are older residents. You know, it's not such a given that like all the young parents now live here and everyone would vote for regionalization.
Why are the young parents versus old people?
But if that
Well,
has nothing to, we're just talking
again,
about researching.
Just humor me. I don't want to argue every single
But you're,
minute
you are,
point.
but you're spending more time than all of us in making comments, right? So they're valid concerns,
I'm
right?
spending
And I
more-
hear you,
I
but,
spoke
you know,
50 seconds so far.
and, you know.
But
So do your
lots of concerns, right?
regionalization, it's fine. Just remember, I warned you that it's got the potential that it could really blow up in our face.
What we're saying is,
Light of the potential problem. We
Right.
understand that.
it's, we're saying is research it to figure what those are, figure out what those are, and that's like, we used to have a thing in Bridgewater where we never said, don't do something because it's difficult to do. We do difficult things, that's okay. Even if it's tough, like, but figuring out what those problems are and what the solutions are is what we're talking about. Nobody's saying is we're gonna do this tomorrow. There's lots of implications, lots of second and third order consequences that none of us may know about right now, but what we're saying is, yeah, Chris, spend a lot of time.
Again, that's great. I just figured I would share my point of view. This can go the way it wants to go. I'm just saying.
I agree with all the concerns you raised, like, those are all dangers I see. And like, how do you make sure that you don't run into that, run into that? And how do you do that without spending all your time focused on this? Because we should be thinking about educating kids, making sure we're focused on that. But the degree to which we can invest some time, if it's the main topic of conversation for the next 2 years, I don't want anything to do with it.
And there's a reason why there's one person in the room who hasn't said a word about this. And it's by design.
Yeah.
This is an initiative that I think is important.
Yeah.
I am not gonna put words in Dr. McKinnon's mouth, nor do I want him focused on this, when he has all those things to focus on.
Yeah, that's fine. I agree with that completely. Like, if we do a little legwork and we find like, hey, there's something here, it's worth it, then yeah, but not if it's the main thing we're focused on, because I don't want to focus on logistics. I want to focus on learning. So yes, Chris, go ahead.
So the overarching consensus question, I heard some discussion of forming a committee to do this or what have you. Is it go, Chris, figure this out and come back with all of the modeling and everything else and solve all these problems? Is it, let's have some combination of people who are willing to study this collectively? Or is it neither of those things? I mean, I'm happy to do this it's a preliminary committee to decide if we need a committee, or it's just or we can rehabilitate Mike's favorite structure and ways of working committee that created that report 13 years ago. That if you read it today, it would have been like it was written yesterday. And work through this question. I'm open to any of those approaches, but it sounds to me, of the folks who have said anything tonight, the general consensus is, if you can make regionalization happen, it solves a lot more of our problems than it creates. But that doesn't mean there aren't landmines. It doesn't mean we don't need to be cognizant of those. And if we can't solve some of the what's the catches, then it doesn't work. And that's an okay solution too.
Yeah.
It's fine to study it and then not bring it forward for a vote, when you determine that after reviewing it, it won't work.
I love option two. I would like to be part of the committee. I'm happy to make Chris the chair of that subcommittee. But yeah, that would be my.
I think it's
It's
more than
worth
worthwhile.
pursuing, I think.
Mhm.
And if, it's optional to join, so if someone, anyone who doesn't have the time or believe in it, time off your back.
But at the same time, it doesn't need to be a group of people who are gung ho to regionalize. In fact, I think that makes it worse, because that is just sort of a preconceived outcome. The best work that I've done on these boards is when there is a healthy disagreement, because that gets us to a better outcome.
Yeah.
Sounds like Mike.
Yeah.
So Mike, Chris, come back.
Good luck.
Sure.
Well, but I'm in that camp. But I'm happy to help financial modeling. Once you talk about modeling, I'm like, oh.
Yeah, I was gonna say I can help with that too, but I guess you got it, so. It feels like Jeff's voice would be helpful for the troubleshooting side of things.
It's all about the money.
Yeah.
For this kind of thing.
Yeah. Especially for Easton, like the politics are a little different in different ways, so.
I mean, in theory, non-quorums of each of the boards could have a working group that works collaboratively. There's no need that it needs to be a joint anything.
Happy to play devil's advocate as much as you want and like beat against your ideas that I think are good, but I think the best. I do think it sounds easy, and like I think in theory most people agree with this. And I think we also have to say, what are the benefits to students? What are the benefits to teachers? What are the benefits to the town? And like finances comes into a huge part of that. But teachers, again, there's benefits beyond an Easton teacher getting paid a little bit more. There has to be more than that for this to be worth. I think it's also like thinking more about what are the other benefits, because we talk about curriculum and there's certain things, like we use different curriculum in different places right now, right? So there's other big positives to the education of our kids. Regionalization solves.
I think back to 3 or 4 years ago when there was a discussion about the discontinuance of Latin education. And some folks were upset about it, and then some folks from Easton came to Barlow and couldn't take Latin 1 because the whole curriculum was being rolled up behind it, basically. And because in Easton, there wasn't a Latin or Keller, there was no pathway for those handful of students to do anything. If we had 2 middle schools, 1 district, you could have a Latin teacher that taught in the morning at Reading and the afternoon at Keller. And you would preserve the program on a half and half basis, which you can't do when there would be different associations right now. That's just one sort of example of how do you help students without costing anybody really anything.
Right, it's a lot more flexible for sure. But again, I think when you think about, I think the hard part is we don't know the numbers, so we all assume the worst, as opposed to saying, here's what the actual numbers are, and then what does that look like, what are the percentages? And then how does that impact taxpayers, not only for 1 year, but over multiple years? Because a lot of this, like, even if we did your brilliant 4A idea, there's probably, again, a 15-year span where you're paying different rates, and so modeling that out, which is not my expertise in any way at all, isn't really helpful.
If it costs a bunch more money, it's not gonna work.
Right.
That's, I think, just a fundamental truth.
Yeah, either way.
You can solve anything,
Right.
lots and lots and lots of money,
Right.
all of our schools will start at 8:15.
But on the flip side, there's a theory that this could improve the education and enhance the delivery. And so that's the benefit we have.
100%, and if you can do it, not even at a savings, but at a cost neutral basis, and you can say, I've improved outcomes the same way that the K-12 special ed director ought to do that. You're along the same lines.
Well, let's make a decision. Step 1 or step 2 seem to be the.
I think step 1 feels like it's off the table because there's a lot of people who think it's worth at least considering. It's a question of whether this is everyone go to their corners and do some homework and come back, or a formal, let's have a committee to investigate this. With public notice and meetings and all that right stuff, which
Or
is
non-quorum working group too.
which gets into its own queasy.
Do a little more homework.
You need a motion for the non-quorum working?
No. No motion. No motion.
So my suggestion would be, there's a little more research done, then come back and form a formal committee.
Yeah.
I think there's like a couple questions still to answer, and then it goes into committee, because committee feels very absolute, and I think could ruffle feathers, to Mike's point, without the need to ruffle, unless we have we can answer people's questions, which I'm not sure we're 100% ready to do.
Right. If we can say, here are models where this is how we resolve some of these union issues.
That's right.
It's either gonna be plus 18%, minus 3%, or somewhere in between. You can at least have that as a conversation and figure out what.
Right, versus like, oh, we don't know the answer to that, and then it just creates a lot of
Sure is hard.
additional
Yeah.
confusion, and
Right.
people's like,
Yeah, what are the hard numbers and the differences between
Yeah.
the teachers
People don't
association, et
understand.
cetera? All right, it's not any good.
Well, thank you for humoring me.
Yeah, thank you.
No, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to central office contract. $20 anyway, so.
You actually walked $80. Four people.
I think you would have had 20 people.
There's no way.
You didn't say what time zone.
Yeah.
Mountain Sun.
Okay, John, do you want to tee up the contract discussion?
Sure. So the joint negotiating committee met over the course of the last few weeks, a couple of times to discuss our senior leaders in central office and their contracts. We tend to, just for anyone new or unfamiliar with the process, we tend to have our superintendent on a 3-year contract, which we tend to extend a year each year so that we always have them on a 3-year contract. And we've had different levels of, 3-year, 3-year for superintendent, 2-year or 1 year, depending on new senior leaders coming in. We usually put them on 1 year, and then if we feel enthusiastic about continuing, we either add another year or we'll put them on a 2-year, and I think there are considerations for 3-year terms. The majority of the conversation centered around compensation and not sort of other terms in the contracts. I think we've made a concerted effort over the course of the last 3 years or so to reduce murky benefits that cause confusion amongst the sort of people in the town, and they say, wait, how much does the superintendent make? How much does the assistant superintendent Yeah, how much are they making? And when we have to say, well, then there's also this and there's also this. I think we lose people. And so in an effort to drive transparency, we really sort of reduced all those extra benefits and just said like, let's take those off the table. And instead of, hey, we're gonna pay you for this or this or this, we just put it into the compensation. So that's the history on it. After meeting a couple of times in executive session and deciding on a negotiating position, we empowered the chairs to go have a conversation with Dr. McKinnon. And I'll leave it to the chairs to finish that.
Okay. So I don't know if Mr. Parkin or Mr. Hicks would like to chime in, but the recommendation coming out of the negotiating committee and the discussion with the superintendent was very much in alignment with his recommendation during our budget workshops as far as the compensation 2.5% for central office staff. He did make slight modifications to that. One of the employees was hired just recently, and so that salary was didn't really need to be adjusted or increased in year one as they just came on board. Dr. McKinnon did recommend that we give Mrs. Scribani a 3% increase. And there was also a request for an annuity for the superintendent. And so Chris, I'll let you explain the nuance as to how that's classified in the classified in the
Sure,
contract.
what I would say, Mike, and I shared this with my board, is that we have a tentative agreement with the administration with respect to contract terms for the next year. And as those contract terms are tentative and draft, they're confidential at the moment until they're ratified by the boards. And so my view on this would be that if anybody wants to discuss those, and my board isn't privy to those exact details, and I assume the other boards have by email at this point also, that if there's questions about the details, we could convene an executive session to hash those out. And then once we ratify them, obviously they'll be posted publicly, and then the details will be there.
No.
I don't want to go into the nuance.
No. I was just wondering how that would. I wasn't meaning to give the details here in public session.
You mean the mechanism?
Correct.
The expectation being that to the extent the superintendent's compensation includes W-2 wages plus an annuity.
Correct.
The intent of the committee, the contract would say the superintendent's total compensation is X, of which Y is W-2 wages and Z is annuity.
Right.
And so that from the public's perspective, the total compensation is in black letters here today, and nothing is buried below as if been concerned about.
Right. So what I detailed really has been public to this point, and so if we so choose to go into executive section, we can discuss contractual terms in more detail if that's the wishes.
I think we would look for either a motion to convene an executive session to discuss the draft contract terms, or a motion to approve the draft contract terms and direct the chairs to enter into agreements to effectuate those terms.
So.
Motion two.
So, yeah, I guess we start. Does anyone feel that they would like to go into an executive session?
I'd like to move for Region 9 to go to executive session to discuss questions or comments that the boards may have with respect to the proposal.
Are you inviting Dr. McKinnon?
Oh, inviting Dr.
Is there a second on Cheryl's motion?
As a courtesy, I'll look at the same motion and write it, please. Thank you, Mike.
Make a motion.
Second, Mr. Shannon.
I'll make the motion for Easton.
I'll second.
On the vote, all in favor of Region 9?
It's like a wave over here.
Okay.
We've lost,
It's unanimous.
we've lost Steph online. Everybody here is Laura unanimous. Good. We can probably say goodnight to Sarah, right?
I think so.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm sorry, I should have caught that earlier. I'm
I'll
going
send
to.
you my stuff, Sharon.